Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and today is about as close as I get to a Stonks episode. We just recently had our FAQ, which makes now a pretty good time to take stock of the meta, not in its full detail because we haven't had enough time. Honestly, we haven't seen enough testing on the table, but most people have probably tried one or two things at this point and seen some of their buddies try something. And for those at home who don't get to have a lot of games, hey, that's what this video is for. I'm going to be looking at some of the sort of best buys coming out of the current metagame as it slowly forms up. So I'm going to kind of combine budget with power level here to kind of create a sort of buyer's guide where you can get things that are going to be relatively cheap, that are going to also be relatively effective on the table and give you a lot of good games for hopefully a long time here. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about some factions that are looking really well set up for the near future. And the first one is going to be a bit of a weird one because I'm going to pick Skaven, even though they just got some small nerfs in the FAQ, because I think they're staying great. I think there's really kind of a three-team S tier right now between Dispossessed, Soulblight, and Skaven. And of the other two, I would say they'll probably still get some nerfs coming down the pipeline, probably maybe around with Hellsmiths of Hashut, who knows. Skaven, I think, are probably done getting nerfed, and they're still very, very good. The thing that everyone hated, which was a Rat Ogre getting into your team and then having infinite extra attack actions that you can't do anything about because the Pack Masters keep coming back, that has been dealt with, but Skaven still have just millions of other really powerful options. And in my opinion, right now, there are two really high-level ways to build Skaven. You can either take those same combos that were happening before, but now you don't run a Packmaster because any Packmasters because they're no longer resurrectable with the battle trait. So instead, you just run a Master Molder, and it has the same abilities. And it can combo off with the Roger. You do have to be a little bit cute about how you set up your deployments, but that's going to be kind of the backbone of your list, and how you set the rest of it is going to be kind of up to you. You'd probably still have 3 clan rats to make sure that you have one in every deployment, but then you're trying to get some numbers and get some guys. The other way to build Skaven that I think is really effective right now is just Parade of Weirdos. Off Meta Musings did a video kind of. His version is pretty similar to what I would call Parade of Weirdos. I think he often runs a ranged Storm Fiend in there. I think that basically if you're just running a lot of different Underworlds Skaven at a time, you can do really well. There's someone doing very well in TTS League right now with a Parade of Weirdos type Skaven list that actually has 12 bodies, which is pretty or maybe 11 bodies, but either way, just a lot of rats. And, you never used to be able to do this, but now that the battle trait resurrects your clan rats, you can just be insanely aggressive feeding your clan rats to your opponent, and then that buys you time to get these sort of weird Skaven ability specialists to actually do their thing, which is pretty powerful. So the thing about Skaven is they can either be really difficult to collect or really easy, depending on where you live, who else is in your community, etc. If there's a lot of 40k players in your community, but not a lot of AOS players, there's a good chance that there are, if you're in North America, that there are a lot of Skaven Tide boxes out there. And the reason I say that is because Adepticon was giving out Skaven Tide for free. And all the 40k players were getting these Skaven Tides, and they are still trying to offload them. They don't know how. 40k players don't engage with AOS players very much. They have no idea how, like, who wants Skaven Tide, how to find them. So if you live in a community where you have, kill team message boards, you can put sort of questions in and things like that, you can find Skaven Tide for pretty cheap. There was recently a swap meet in the Twin Cities where people were picking up the bits of Skaven Tide for like $20 for $100 worth of plastic, stuff like that. So it takes legwork. The reason it takes legwork is because right now online people are selling bits of Skaven Tide broken out by unit, and so they're making bank. you get your free Skaven Tide box, you cut it up, and you sell the bits for like $400 in the end once you've cut out every single unit. But that's not a very good deal for you. So I don't think you should try to get it online. But if you already have it or you're able to secure it locally, it becomes really easy to create really powerful lists from there. If with just a Skaven Tide box and a Master Molder, you can have an excellent army already. Maybe you would want to add some Storm Vermin to that after a little while. Maybe you'd want to add an Underworlds team to that after a little while. But for the most part, just a Master Molder, a Rat Ogre, and a bunch of Clan Rats is going to do work. The next kind of step, though, is you're going to want to get Underworlds Warbands. And the first thing I would do is convert up your Skaven Tides Clan Rats and the Claw Lord on the weird rat mount. I would just convert him, take him off the mount, and put him on some cork for a tactical rock. And he's your Spike Claw or your Claw Lord, either one. And then if you just take the shields off of the Clan Rats and put whatever little weapon bits you've got in their hands, those can be the Swarm, because Spike Claw's Swarm is essentially just like dual wielding Clan Rats that don't have shields. And so you've got your Spike Claw Swarm, right? And the reason I say that is because Skittershank's Claw Pack and Spike Claw Swarm are both very, very good, but they are very expensive. Claw Pack goes for $80, Spike Claw Swarm goes for $70. Don't pay those prices. Convert the Swarm, and as sad as it is to say, just skip the Clawback. Skittershank's Clawback is very, very good, but skip it. I'm not that high on the new Skaven team. I'm happy for the people who are trying it out. I just think that some of the hoops you have to jump through to make things work are a little bit too tough, which is good because honestly, the abilities are so NPE and horrible. If they were actually like aggressively costed, it would be the least pleasant thing ever to deal with. So I'm really glad that they costed them conservatively. People who like to be, it's called griefers in the Magic community, but griefers can play the new Skaven team if they want to, and just deal with the fact that they're playing something that's inefficient. I think that that's a good situation. The one that is very purchasable, though, is Skabbik's Plague Pack. It's running for about $45 online, which is a little bit more than most Underworlds teams, but it's really worth it because the models in there are very powerful. The two essentially Plague Monks, the one with the staff and the one with the knives, those are really what Plague Monks should be. Plague Monks are not very good, but the two bespoke Plague Monks in the Underworlds team are really good, and then the two kind of fancier specialists are pretty interesting too and pretty playable. Just for 110 and 115 points, they're totally usable too. So I would say that entire group is pretty usable, and so very worth picking up for any kind of Skaven player. Again, if you're starting from complete scratch, if you're not in North America, sorry for my British and continental Europe viewers and Australian viewers. I know I have a couple of those. Sorry to all of them for starting this off with something that's mostly just cheap in North America. I know it's a little bit harder to get a hold of in some other places where they didn't just give a bunch of free promotional Skaven Tides out. Luckily, it's tough, but you're going to want Clan Rats, Plague Packs, Storm Fiends, and Storm Vermin. And that's a lot. That's a lot of things. So I wouldn't get Skaven if I were having to piece it together, but if you can start with Skaven Tide, it's a really great buy. Dispossessed are also a really good buy. Now, I do think there are nerfs coming down the pipeline. Like I said before, I think that Over My Dead Body is probably going to be nerfed when Hellsmiths of Hashut come out. I don't know what the nerf is going to be, if it's going to make it so you count as one more on an objective instead of two more, or if it's just going to leader lock the ability. I would expect one of the two. I hope it's leader locked because having access to that ability papers over a lot of Order's problems for a lot of the kind of more middle of the road Order teams. And so I hope that they just leader lock it, because I think that it's much more interesting as an allyable thing than it is as just a whole faction thing, but you never know. They could do anything. The point that I'm trying to make here is that even once the double's fixed, the buffs on the troops have made it so that the faction plays in non-objective missions the way it was always supposed to play. You don't have to only run Ironbreakers now. Before, even though Ironbreakers were terrible, you kind of had to just mass Ironbreakers because you couldn't get enough bodies in your list otherwise. And even just losing out on like 5-10 points, that made the difference between having a reasonable ally and not. But now you can play Longbeards, which are like Ironbreakers with the toughness 5, but they actually do damage. If you are willing to go down to toughness 4, you can play Hammerers and do a ton of damage. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do now with Dispossessed to feel like you're actually engaging in the game. And then, of course, they always have Grudge Bearers, which is their sweet sort of ally combo. And so if you just get the Longbeards Hammerers kit, the Longbeard and the Hammerer leaders are perfectly playable. And, you know, over the Warden King, I know the Warden King is the more popular if you have a big collection, but the cheaper leaders are perfectly fine. And then you can pick up whatever your favorite ally is, whether it's the Slan Starmaster, who didn't make the video for some reason, but I actually do think is really good. I should keep mentioning the Starmaster because I do think it's really good. You know, you could pick a Starmaster, you could pick, you know, all sorts of different Stormcast heroes, things like that, to be your sort of ally that you want to empower with your guys. And it's pretty cheap. The only thing I would say is if you can, try to avoid the new Old World kit. It's going to come with square bases, which is super annoying. And also it's $75 for 20 bodies, which is way worse for Warcry. You know, you save like a few cents on your bodies, but it's way better to get $40 for the AOS kit. It's still knocking around online quite a bit, so you don't have to just go direct to Old World. Please don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. And you're probably only going to need 10 bodies anyway, because you'll bring in an ally and you'll probably end with like 9 or 10 bodies in your list, but you know, 2 or 3 of those will be allies. Another one on the rise. This isn't rising all the way up to S tier. I think Teratic Cohort are good, or else I wouldn't have put them here, but they're not going to be sort of terrors of the meta the way Skaven and Dispossessed are. But I do think Teratic Cohort are pretty good now. If you like the aesthetic of OCR, go for it. I have some issues with the aesthetics on this warband personally, but you know, it's not about that. I think mechanically they're in a great place. The Cavalos Centauri is a perfectly solid model. He's really good when he's using his bespoke double to get extra attacks and crit on 5s, and he gets to, you know, you can give him various blessings to make it better, like a strength blessing or a crit blessing go really well on him. And then the real piece that's actually really good in Teratic Cohort now is the Teratic Prowler. I know it only went down 10 points, but going from 80 to 70 is a really big deal. That's like a really big percentage drop. And so at 70 points for move 4, it's really hard to be able to do that much damage. Yes, they can't carry treasure, but you can fix that. One is you can do a double box. It costs you about 115 getting it online. Sorry again for my not North American viewers who are going to have to do a little bit of currency exchange there, but basically, the double box, you can have 2 of the Cavalos, 1 of the Foot Guy, and for most treasure missions, that's going to be plenty of treasure carriers, and you can spend the rest of your list on Prowlers to get a ton of bodies, something that Teratic certainly could never do before. And so you'll put a lot of bodies on the board and sort of have a lot of flexibility that way. You can probably have, I think it counts to 9 bodies if you have 6 Prowlers, 1 of these Foot Guys, and then 2 of these Centaurs. And that's a pretty good list. The other way you can build them that is also just really price effective is if you could just get 1 box and then your favorite dice-hungry Underworlds team. The whole, you know, shtick for Teratic Cohort is that they produce a ton of wild dice, right? So one of the best things you can do with that is bring in Soulblight Gravelords or bring in Nighthaunt, who are trying to use a lot of dice as part of what they do. And Teratic Cohort is going to make sure that they have plenty of dice to play with. Right now, I think the Exiled Dead is probably best at that because Daintelos really wants to resurrect his little boys, and his little boys really want to shoot lightning out of their weird arms. So the Exiled Dead are really good, but Zendara's Gravebreakers are also perfectly reasonable, and so is the Headsman's Curse. The Headsman's Curse is just cool because you have probably the one piece in Death that is a better mobile hammer than the Centaur, which is Wielder of the Blade. He's probably the only one. But he needs a lot of dice to be better than the Centaur, right? He needs to be able to use his bonus move or be able to resurrect things, right? And so you bring in Wielder of the Blade, but you have a ton of wild dice for him because you're playing in Teratic Cohort. And then, Wielder's little ghosty friends aren't like the most amazing ghosty friends, but they're perfectly reasonable. And they're better than the usual Night Haunt stuff. So I think that that's a pretty reasonable one, but any kind of very dice-hungry set of Death, Underworlds, Warband stuff is going to be pretty good in Teratic Cohort and going to be pretty cheap. You can get all of that for under $100 and get your Warband started that way and have something that's going to last you a long time and be, fairly competitive on the table, which is pretty cool. The last faction on the rise I'm going to talk about is Khorne Bloodbound, and on the rise in a small way. We're talking like from low B before to kind of high B, low A here. I think the Khorne Bloodbound are getting slightly better on the margins. They kind of have been every FAQ. Here, the Realm Gore Ritualist and a Blood Reaver together cost the same as a Slaughter Priest. So you get that Slaughter Priest utility, but you're no longer paying a whole bunch of points for an inefficient body. Instead, you've got, the Realm Gore Ritualist is not a particularly efficient body, but you're spending fewer points on it. And then you're just getting a bonus Blood Reaver, and that Blood Reaver can run around, smack stuff, give you extra activations. It's great. They also have +1A Korgoraths. I'm not that into Korgoraths without without the blessing. I'll probably just leave that in. I'm not that into Korgoraths without the blessing, but with the blessing, they become one of the sort of more efficient fighty pieces in Chaos. Anytime you're getting +1 attack on a 4/8 profile, it's a good thing, right? So other offensive juggernauts in the Korgorath's weight class have kind of been nerfed. So the Korgorath is like weirdly a big winner out of, say, the Crusher getting nerfed, because Crushers, a Korgorath with +1 attack was, I think, in the 235 range, and that's starting to compete with those ogre leaders. And so those going up makes it so that the Korgorath looks a lot better in comparison, right? Even though it's not changing at all. The same is kind of true for Blood Reavers to a lesser extent, because a lot of good chaff has, stayed really good. So, for example, Soulblight chaff is still going to be a lot better than Blood Reavers, but they really do exist pretty happily in that just next notch down. And it all kind of comes together to give you a lot of options where you have, high level offense and kind of low-level chaff kind of running around on the same place. The other thing that's kind of interesting about Khorne Bloodbound is that the Deathbringer has been overperforming lately. We don't have enough stats yet on the Deathbringer to really say how good it is competitively, but I have kind of noticed the people bringing it to events have been doing better than their list would make me think they would do. I made a whole video on some of the new game changers in the meta, and Deathbringer was one of the 3 pieces I covered. Other people have made content trying to say, like, no, the Deathbringer is not breaking the game, things like that. I don't think they were responding to me. I haven't been saying it breaks anything. I've been pretty honest about all the hoops you have to jump through to make it work. The thing, though, is that at the end of the day, even though you have these hoops, the burden of mental sort of energy on your opponent to play around the Deathbringer is greater than the burden of mental energy on you to put the Deathbringer in a position to succeed, if that makes sense. So, like, yes, there is counterplay to Deathbringers. You can stay outside of 5 inches of them, or you can, put a lot of pressure on them elsewhere so that they feel a lot of pressure to use their wild dice for other things other than the Deathbringer. Or, you can feed the Deathbringer chaff, things like that, because it only has the 1 inch range, so it can't do the thing of disengage and still hit something. So there's a lot of counterplay, but if you're feeding Deathbringer's chaff, that's only a 180 point model. If you're feeding my 180 point guy chaff the whole time and I don't have to walk to the chaff, I'm perfectly fine with that, right? So I would say the counterplay, yes, is there, but in general, it seems like the kind of burden of proof is higher on your opponent than it is on you when you're playing it, which is really a good place to be. That's something that you want when you're playing, even though there's a lot of hoops to jump through. Even though I think it's going to be really hard to go 4-0 with a Deathbringer in your list, I think as a piece to have some really wild times, have at least one really upset opponent and go 3-1, I think the Deathbringer is like exactly right there. I think it's just not as good as Vex if you're trying to win a tournament. Vex more for 10 more points just does more in more situations. But the Deathbringer is so far above everything else in the like chaos wasteland at those points costs that I think that that's just a really big thing for Khorne Bloodbound. And so if you're not into the Realm Gore Ritualist pulls, I think Deathbringer is a perfectly reasonable leader to have in your Khorne lists. The Wrathmaster is also a big winner because of the counter changes. You used to deal yourself like 7 damage with the Wrathmaster, and now you'll only take 3, which is really good. There's obviously still a bunch of traps in Khorne Bloodbound. It's super easy to make an unplayable list. Wrathmongers, Blood Warriors, Blood Crushers, Skull Reapers, they're all bad. But this is a sort of buyer's guide video. I want to talk about the real reason that Khorne Bloodbound are on this list, which is the value boxes. The Goreblade Warband is gettable online for really cheap. From GW, it's $100. The Red Revelation is harder to find online, but it is available from GW for $90. Those are both really good value boxes for starting Warcry. And if you just get one of those two and then a Realm Gore Ritualist or a Deathbringer, you have everything you want for a while with Khorne Bloodbound. You have gotten into Khorne Bloodbound for a price of, you could do it for as low as 100 if you find a good deal online. Maybe you want to spend up to 160 if you want to have like both the leader options and you want to get the Gore Blades, which have the Korgorath, something like that. But even 160 for, at that point, you can definitely build. If you have Goreblade and Realm Gore and Deathbringer, at some point in there, you're going to find bits and pieces that make a pretty competitive list. $160 for a truly competitive list is a pretty good buy, and that's something that I don't think is going to get nerfed anytime soon. Even though I was just spending a whole bunch of breath talking about how the Deathbringer is overperforming early, I don't think it's ever going to be in a situation where it needs nerfs, where it's getting like huge win rates. I think the better Deathbringer does, as soon as someone wins a tournament with a Deathbringer, people are going to come out of the woodwork with unplayable, horrible Deathbringer lists and bring those to tournaments, and it's going to stop Deathbringers from getting nerfed, right? So you don't have to worry about them ever getting nerfed. You can just keep playing them at your casual tables. I said it before, I think Deathbringer is a little mean in casual play, but you can certainly do it if your opponent doesn't mind the drama. And if they do mind, play that Realm Gore Ritualist, because I do think that that's a really important new piece for the faction. Now I'm going to talk about Underworlds, and this is not the place to prosecute whether or not this is good for the game or not, but what I will say is that generally, if you want to have a lot of options in your list building and you want to have sort of competitive options for multiple factions, you have to own multiple Underworlds warbands in competitive Warcry play. Luckily, you can get a lot of them for pretty cheap, which is great. So I'm going to start with Heroes and Hunters. That is the Order box with 4 Order warbands. It's got Mayari's Purifiers and Thundrik's Profiteers, I think. Those two are pretty marginal. Mayari itself has a really cool triple that's fun to build around. It's really only good in like a gunline warband. So it's just kind of niche. Thundrik's basically just have one fighter who is proxyable. So I'm not that big. Yeah, I'm not that big on either of those. Yulthari's Guardians and Brethren of the Bolt both have niche competitive uses. I think it's really easy with Brethren to fall into a very mid-range trap, including too many of them in your list, but there's no denying that the double is pretty effective as far as if you're worried about being able to pierce high toughness fighters. If there's a lot of Stormcast play in your area, that double can be very useful. Yulthari's Guardians are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where they're actually very useful in Stormcast lists. So both of these have niche competitive uses, which make the box an okay purchase, but nothing I would suggest. I would say that you're better off finding Yulthari's Guardians on the internet on their own, or Brethren of the Bolt, depending on which one you want. Unlike that, however, Despoilers and Demons have three of the most iconic semi-competitive crews in all of Chaos, in all of Warcry's history, really. Ephelim's Pandemonium, Kagra's Ravagers, and the Gore Chosen of Drom are all just like huge fan favorites, and here you can get them all in one box. Dread Pageant, oddly enough, might be the most powerful of the four, but they're really only good in their own faction. So that's something that, if you don't want to play Slaanesh, you can kind of get rid of them, I guess. The reason just being that if you're going to bring Dread Pageant, you're really doing it so that you can have Slake Slash. The leader, Vasilak, is not that bad. He's fine. But once you have Vasilak and Slake Slash in your list, and you're allying, that probably means you have another leader who's, maybe big, maybe mid-size, but you're just spending a lot of your points on three fighters who are all very sort of niche impact, or like they're specialists, right? 200-point fighters who don't overwhelm you with offense, who do kind of fancy stuff. That's the kind of fighter that you don't want to necessarily fill out a list with all over the place. But in Slaanesh, where they can sort of ally in a big, more offensive piece, and they can bring a whole bunch of homunculi, they're really good. So this is a box really for Johnnies, because there's three of just like the wildest, most fun factions in Chaos, and things where you can go 2-1-1 with this box in a million different ways, with a million different factions, and just have a ton of fun. You're never going to feel like you're being bored. The more sort of competitive player, or someone who's not necessarily getting their happiness from the same place, as far as like feeling really crazy and innovative with every list, that kind of person can skip this box. But if you love having just like a lot of different crazy stuff to do, this is absolutely the box for you, and maybe one of the best purchases in all of Warcry. Revenants of the Realms is the opposite. Wielder of the Blade is still the default death ally, and Crimson Court does have Gorath, which is powerful, but the other two are pretty meh. I know that some folks like the Grimwatch, which is the Flesh Eater Courts one. I am a lot less convinced. I will admit that 10 Wound Chaff is way better than 8, so that's good for pure Flesh Eater Courts, but otherwise I'm not that interested in it. And the Osiarch Bone Reapers one we don't even have to talk about. So I would say personally, rather than get this box, just get Headsman's Curse on its own. It's just $30. Brutes and Bandits, though, is much closer to the Chaos one. Morgok is still a really good destruction ally, even though he got nerfed. It's one of those things where he's not good, but you kind of need him in destruction. It's really hard in a lot of types of tournament packs to keep up with all of the really busted things that the other Grand Alliances can do when it comes to objective play. And so Morgok and Brute Boss let you compete on that front, which allows you to leverage, how thick gut rippas are, or how cheap your really cheap guys are, or how, even though they only have 6 wounds, or just how offensive your big hitting pieces are. So Morgok is a really good facilitator that way, and so you'll often need him in a lot of competitive destruction lists. Then you have Manok and Crew, which are an absolute must-have if you like to play Cruel Boys, or if you like to play Iron Jaws, or if you like to play Gorger Maw Pack. Yes, I know not very many players ally Manok. Dacunin Crew is, I think, what they're called in Iron Jaws, but they should be, because being able to get Shank and Torb, I don't know, I can't remember what his name is. Torka, there we go. Torka, Shank, and Manok all in Iron Jaws is really helpful. And Iron Jaws has such a tough time with numbers. They're going to be really happy to have Gicket as well. And that's just a really good option for both them and Gorger Mawpack to just get a few more bodies onto the board. In fact, you might make a list with just Morgoth's Crew and Manok's Crew, because Thug, who is one of Morgoth's minions, is also really good. So you could make a pretty reasonable warband with just those two. But you've also got the Loon Court, and Snorbo is a really good piece. Destruction has a lot less need for Snorbo. So, for example, Order and Chaos would both absolutely kill to have Snorbo available. They would be allying in the Loon Court all over the place. But even in Destruction, Snorbo is still pretty solid. And the Buccaneers, the Ogre Buccaneer thing with all of the weird pets, there are worse Underworld warbands. It's not that bad. It's bad enough to keep the box from being A grade, but it's still perfectly fine and a fun time to have. So these Underworld boxes, I would say, the Order the Chaos and the Iron Jaws one. I cannot talk today. The Chaos one and the Destruction one are both really good choices. Another really good Underworlds purchase right now is Deathgorge, if you can find it for cheap. Some places online still have it for around $100. There was a time just like a year ago when a lot of LGSs had Deathgorge because it really wasn't popular for Underworlds. So it's really only been Warcry players who have been buying it. So if you live somewhere that doesn't have a lot of Warcry players, there's a really good chance that you can find this at an LGS. Like any LGS that doesn't do a very good job like clearing their stock on eBay, they're going to probably have Deathgorge somewhere in their clearance section, and you're going to be able to get it. And these two warbands are just two of the most important pieces in all of Warcry. The Thricefold Discord, or whatever their name is, Vexmore and Vastus, and the one who's not as good, are sort of the default ally package in Chaos. Vastus is, if not the best wizard in the game, she's probably the third or fourth best wizard in the game. She's very competitively viable even without Vexmore. Vexmore is the default fighting piece in Chaos. They are just very, very powerful. Yes, there are things that compete with Vexmore now, but it's still just better than those things. Then you have Cyrene and Sephenir. The rest of the warband isn't that important. They're not as good. But Cyrene and Sephenir are a really great package to use 250 points on in Order because you can give a ton of reach without dropping activations. You can still have pretty good damage potential. They're really good for all of the slow warbands in Order. So KO, Dispossessed, Fire Slayers, all of them are really happy to see Cyrene and Sephenir. Yeah, just everyone loves them. Vulcan Flame Seekers also really happy to see Cyrene and Sephenir. So both of the warbands in Deathgorge are amazing, and if you can get the box for under $100, you absolutely have to. And it's worth doing your homework if you ever get into an LGS to see if you can find this, because online they're really hard to get. Both cost like 80% of the box on their own. But now that we've seen multiple FAQs sort of go by with these fighters. So for example, Cyrene was buffed in an FAQ a year ago, and in this FAQ wasn't changed, and Vexmore just got the 10-point nerf and got the buffs to other Chaos pieces to bring them a little bit closer to being in line with Vexmore. I would say that this is a much safer purchase now than it was like 6 months ago when I might have backed off of buying it just because I wasn't sure if Vexmore would really survive the nerf bat. All right, 3, All right, 3, 2, and 1. So I'm going to call this next section 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to call this next segment Stonkwatch. You can tell I got greedy with building my slide. This says Mega Boss. You can only see Megab. But this is going to be for single models that I think you can find really cheap, or just single unit purchases that you can find really cheap that are interesting from a kind of watch standpoint, as if these were stonks. The first is the Mega Boss, who costs about $40 new. Used to cost more, actually. The Mega Boss used to cost more than a regular foot hero, and at some point they kind of normalized it a little bit and brought it down. But either way, you can get them online for $40 new. But what's special is, because they were the Warhammer Plus like free toy for a really long time, you can now get them really cheap online because they gave away so many of them for free. So you can get them for like $25 used, and that's for just like a huge chonker. They're massive. My Mega Boss is upstairs, otherwise I would show you. But they bring a ton of utility to any destruction list. You get Charge, which is the bonus move. You get Wah, which is the aura move bonus, which is a huge aura because the base is so ridiculously huge on Mega Bosses. And you also have Onslaught, which I wouldn't normally name Onslaught, but anytime you have a Strength 6 for a damage profile, Onslaught is pretty real. So all of those are hugely impactful as a way to use your dice. They also get a lot out of Flexi Blessings compared to other fighters, where a Mega Boss that's arriving on round 2 really wants a +1 move blessing, and then a Mega Boss that's starting on round 1 really wants a +1 attack blessing. And you can just kind of use that in any situation that allows divine blessings to make your Mega Bosses really amazing. I think that the destruction ally landscape has kind of changed quite a bit with the last FAQ. I think getting the Crusher nerfed, sad about the Crusher. I really loved my Crusher. I actually secretly thought it was kind of more useful from a list building standpoint than Gutlords were, even though Gutlords were more popular. And then, of course, Gutlords, which were the premier killing stuff fighter in the game. Both of those were nerfed a little bit, which makes some of the other destruction choices a little bit more palatable. You can still totally play your Gutlord, although it's going to be hard to fit much else in your list. And you can totally play your Crusher if you want. But Auric Mega Bosses, Clawbacks, and Dankhold Troggoths are all very interesting. I think that for a little while, Dankhold Troggoth is going to be the sort of main staple ally. Maybe him, or maybe Malog also competes for that. But the Troggoth, of course, adds a ton of utility, but it's a little more expensive than the Mega Boss if you don't already have one. And there are other bits of utility you get by using the Mega Boss, right? A +1 attack Mega Boss and a Netter or a Stab Grot, or any of these 50-point chaff models, a Noblar, although I can't imagine why you'd put a Mega Boss in your Auric or Ogre Maw Tribes list, but a Noblar or a Stab Grot or a Netta plus a Mega Boss are the same as a +1A Dankhold Troggoth. And yes, you lose out on having Dragon Maul, which is amazing. And you also lose out on a point of strength, but you gain a ton of other utility, and you just gain an extra activation, which is super useful. Just in general. Also, a Dankhold Troggoth will control the board a little bit better than a Mega Boss will, but a Mega Boss beats a Dankhold Troggoth one-on-one. So there's kind of a lot to like there with the Mega Boss. There's also the fact that I think that as a piece, it is one of the best painting projects out there. You can see this one by Lars Christensen, who I assume is Swedish because they did a very Swedish-themed Mega Boss. The colors on the flag also show it. So I think that this is a piece that I would absolutely be interested in acquiring if I was into destruction. I would also be interested in acquiring Clawback and Dankhold Troggoth, but the Mega Boss is way cheaper than those, and I think equally as good. So people should try it out. Grandfather's Gardeners are one where this is not a buy or a sell advisory. This is a hold or just keep watch. The thing you want to keep watch for here with Grandfather's Gardeners is rules clarification. I think most TOs right now are ruling these fighters as having the same rules as Bladeborn for list building purposes, but a lot of TOs in the UK are not doing that. A lot of people who have maybe telegraphed that they think that they know things are saying that they should expect this to be clarified eventually one day. I wouldn't hold my breath about GW ever actually clarifying what they mean here. They kind of copy pasted rules as if these guys were unique in faction fighters, even though why would they be? The same true for every other Underworlds warband, right? Like they gave them the Order of Azir wording instead of the Bladeborn wording, but they didn't give any kind of designer's commentary. And why would you have some Underworlds warbands on one set of rules? And like, if these don't have the Bladeborn rules, that's just terrible design, right? And if they do, then okay, whatever. It's the kind of change. Making it a change is the kind of change you would change every single Underworlds warband to in a new edition. Having half of them on one set of rules and half of them on a different one is just a terrible idea. So who knows what the actual clarification is going to be here, and that's why we are saying kind of hold or hold off, right? However, from an actual in-game standpoint, Grandfather's Gardeners are really good. They're really good in faction, so if you play Nurgle Demons, these are a must-have. They are the best fighters in your faction. Slunge and Maggoty Stroog are quite simply the two best Plague Bearers. You start every single Nurgle Demons list with Slunge and Maggoty Stroog. You probably also put Squort in there just because having the extra 5 points is really nice. Plague Bearers should have gone to 55 points instead of 60, so this gives you two fighters who are at the correct points cost, right? Then there's the fact that if they do get the Bladeborn rules, these guys become a legitimate competitive backbone for Chaos factions that don't have playable chaff on their own. Things like, what Exiled Dead does for Death, or I think it's a little bit closer to what Sons of Velmorn used to do for Death Grand Alliance before Sons of Velmorn got nerfed. So, things like, for example, Nurgle Rotbringers, who really wish they had some cheap fighters available to them. They're going to be perfectly happy to run, all three of these guys. They would probably run Bug-Eye Dripterus too, and just use the whole thing and then just have like three of their own fighters in there. And that's going to be a pretty solid warband for them. There's just ways that you can do that with almost every faction. A lot of Chaos factions do have pretty good chaff, but the ones that don't are just going to be so thankful to have this if it does have Bladeborn rules. The fighters are just, very good. Even the 85.1 isn't the worst because it's got the 15 wounds. 15 is a nice little breakpoint to have, although the damage is pretty lackluster there, but it can still be worthwhile to put in your list. So there's a lot to really like about Grandfather's Gardeners. If you don't play Nurgle Demons already, don't pick them up yet, but just wait to see what the TOs in your area are ruling for this as far as, the kind of inconsistent, weird wording that they chose in the FAQ. The next thing on Stonkwatch is secondhand Reclusians. The Reclusian Prime is an incredible ally to have in Order. Sometimes when I'm playing, I play a lot of Order lists. For example, I play Order Soup a ton. And sometimes I take Annihilator Prime. Sometimes I take Reclusian Prime. It really depends on what the list is doing. And I've won tournaments with both. The All Reclusian Warband is also pretty good, so you're not just only using one of these models. If you get two groups of secondhand Reclusians, if you can scrounge up a couple dogs, I don't know, maybe you play Wildercore, maybe you play Vulcan Rune Seekers. If you can just scrounge up two things that can pretend to be dogs, 5 Reclusians and 2 dogs is an amazing warband. It's really good. It won't hold up in a swarm pack. Anything with like 3 objective missions in the pack, you might have a tough time. But in any other type of pack, in a more balanced situation, it really does work. Those Reclusians kill a lot of things, and they don't die quick. And and you can get a lot out of it. So because of that, because of all of the sort of applications of Reclusians, they're going for $30, just like everywhere online. They're very, very cheap because they're in Skaven Tide that is everywhere. Just 2 groups, $60 for a competitive warband is really hard to beat. So if you've got the dogs, that's it. $60, you have a competitive warband. I don't know if there's an easier way to get a more effective warband. I think, for a long time, I would go around saying that the Ogre Gluttons box is the best one box purchase in the game for getting into the game. It's still really good, but I would no longer say, if a box of Ogre Gluttons is $60, I wouldn't say that that's a more powerful way to get into the game than 2 groups of Reclusians. That's how good I think Reclusians are. And if you can find them cheap and you're interested in Stormcast, this is the way to start Stormcast. Don't bother getting the Skaven Tide half of Stormcast with a bunch of Liberators in there. It doesn't chop easily into one warband. Instead, just get the Reclusians and be happy with the purchase. One honorable Stonkwatch mention. I told you I needed to remember the Slan Star Master. I wish I'd made a slide for it, but basically the Slan Star Master. Let me pause this video because I need to show you mine. All right, so check this guy out. He's sweet. It's really easy to find awesome proxies for the Slan Star Master. You can see his little space frog face. This sculptor went for maybe a slightly more futuristic take on the model, but it's really easy to find proxies. There's a ton of different 3D print artists who have made their own Star Master. And also the GW one is beautiful, though very, very expensive, right? I've been holding off on painting this guy because I was so sure that he was going to get nerfed. And now that I know he's not going to get nerfed, I'll probably paint him pretty soon. He's very, very powerful, and the best shooting unit in the game has always been a backbone of the game. Slan Star Master has never been the best shooting unit in the game, but they keep nerfing all the other ones. So there's a decent chance he becomes a major backbone of the game. One bit of warning with the Star Master, it's very easy to build a bad list with it, but I think that it's very well positioned going forwards, and you should try it out. If you're interested in big frogs, you should definitely try the Star Master out because I think you're going to be in a great spot with it. Now, any kind of buyer's guide where I'm not honest with you about what I'm buying is a bit disingenuous, right? You should be able to take things with a grain of salt by looking at what I'm purchasing. I am getting Grandpa's Gardeners because I play enough Nurgle that even if they end up getting clarified to not be Bladeborn, I'll make a video about what a stupid decision that is, but then I'll just play them as only Nurgle, and that'll be completely fine, right? I'm also getting the Horns of Hashut box set. I didn't mention them in this video because honestly, I think it's a little reckless to get them just for Warcry, but I'm just holding out on my bet that they are going to have sweet rules, and I just love, inching around the battlefield with sort of dwarves who fight above their weight, but don't necessarily, a single positioning mistake loses you the game, right? But as long as you don't make a positioning mistake, you are in the driver's seat for the game because your guys are just better at fighting pound for pound than the other guys. When I played Nurgle, that's what I was up to. When I played a kind of melee focused Caradhran Overlords, that's what I was up to. That's just always been what I've been up to because it's the way I like to play the game. And so Horns of Hashut, if their play style is at all reasonable, it's going to be a great time, and I'm going to be really happy playing with them. So I'm just holding out hope, but anyone who's not just addicted to move 3 in general, I would stay away. I would very much stay away because Horns of Hashut are, it's a coin flip at best, right? I'm also getting a Realm Gore Ritualist. I have a bunch of Khorne guys all over the place. I've got Blood Reavers galore. I've got Deathbringers galore. So Blood Warriors galore. check that guy out. So I've got all the Khorne pieces. I even, I need to paint my Korgorath, but otherwise I'm just ready to go as soon as I have my Realm Gore Ritualist painted. So I'm going to try it out at some point. This may stay a casual warband for me as opposed to a competitive warband. We'll see if I get a chance to actually put Khorne on the table in a tournament. I'll definitely get them out for pickup games, but I'm excited about that. I'm not buying that many things, although the Horns of Hashut box is going to be really expensive, so I guess I am buying a lot of things. But mostly I'm planning to just like paint my backlog because a lot of stuff in my backlog got better. Clan Rats didn't get any better, but now that Skaven, I know how bad Skaven's getting nerfed, I can paint the Skaven I have and just play with what I've got. I've got a lot of Pestilence stuff that can proxy as Skittershank's Clawback, or Claw Pack, or Skabbix Claw. Oh my god, I can't talk. Anyway, I've got a lot of Pestilence stuff that can proxy as Skabbix Crew. I'm going to sort of convert up Scritch, all of the little like Festering Skaven, Hungering Skaven, all those little guys using bits on the Skaven-Tide Clan Rats. And then I should have a pretty diverse Skaven set, and I'll actually know what is getting nerfed and what's been nerfed and what's not, and what's safe to play. So I'll probably be putting Skaven on the table in a tournament pretty soon. And then I hope to get my Slaves to Darkness and Riverblades painted. I've had an unbuilt box of Riverblades since they came out because I just thought they were cool as a look, and even though the ability design is pretty horrible, I was still kind of hoping that they would get some kind of rework, and so the rework that they did get is all right, and so I'm gonna get them painted and put them on the table. So that way you can kind of take everything I'm saying about what's a good buy and what's not with a grain of salt. Although I will say certain things like like Reclusians. I'm not buying Reclusians because I already bought and painted all my Reclusians. It was for AOS, but I've played them in Warcry and been really happy with them. So yeah, this way you can take everything I say with a grain of salt, knowing what I'm committing to. But I am just going to do a quick recap. I think the overall best buys in Warcry right now, if you are in Death, it's just getting the Headsman's Curse. It's $30. I don't think it's ever going to be nerfed, because if they were going to nerf +1 attack, they would have done it. Instead, they chose to nerf some of the fighters that are the best at exploiting +1 attack. And so that means that the fighters who are really good at exploiting +1 attack, who weren't in that top list, are in a really good spot. So Wielder of the Blade is in a great spot, and just the universal death ally that you can put in any death list and you won't regret it. Yes, you can have competitive death lists without it, but you'll never regret putting it in there. So then for order, I would get the AOS box of Longbeards. You could also, I would just get the Longbeards. You could get the Ironbreaker box, but the Longbeard Hammerers for $40 are just such a great intro into just like a warband that you'll be able to play with whatever your favorite character is in order. You can just put it in that warband and have a great time. So I think that that's going to be a really good solution for a lot of people. For destruction, I would get Brutes and Bandits. Like I said before, Manok Dakunin and Morgoth's crew, they combine to make a pretty respectable warband just on their own. Both of those are just incredible allies where you can just make destruction lists for days with whatever your favorite destruction faction is and those. But also the Loon Court is just a really awesome casual warband as well. The Pirates, we have a local guy, Micah, who plays Skaven when he's wanting to cut throats and take names. But when he's feeling a little bit more chill, he plays this pirate guy, and it's pretty funny. It's not the strongest way to play ogres by a long shot, but it's pretty sweet. Chaos, if you live in North America, you've got to get the Skaven half of Skaven-Tide for cheap as you can, because there's just so much in there, and Clan Rats are so good. The box gives you way too many Clan Rats, but you use some of them for converting into this and that, and you're going to be fine. So that I would say is definitely the best purchase in Chaos. Otherwise, get Vexmore, really. Vexmore only getting a 10-point nerf is a really good situation. Yes, there are lots of other options, like a box of Chosen for the Chosen champion. Things like that could be fun. You could get a Chaos Lord. It could be fun. But I would say Skaven or Vexmore are the buys that will be most guaranteed to give you a lot of return for a long time. So that's it. That's what I think is worth picking up right now post FAQ. If you aren't sure what to buy, if you don't just have one faction that is calling to you, or if you do have a pet faction that's calling to you and you are looking for the pieces that are going to make it competitive for the lowest price, that's basically everything I've got for you there. So hopefully this is helpful, and may all your rolls be crits.